Shen Qingqiu lowered his head, deep in thought, but Liu Jingge thought he was expressing shame after the scolding, and his face relaxed, his tone no longer so severe. None of your comrades understand. Why are you so good to him? Liu Jingge leaned forward just a bit, and the candlelight painted a layer of warmth over his snow-pale face. Tense, he asked, "Or to say, are those rumors true?" The Shen Qingqiu, who had believed great Master Liu would scoff and turn up his nose at gossip, was far too sweet and innocent. Shen Qingqiu's hand clenched around his fan. So, Liu Marshal Brother also believes that baseless hearsay? Liu Jingge straightened again. I don't. Yet you only care to blindly defend that traitor. I'm not blindly defending him, Shen Qingqiu said helplessly. I just don't want to misunderstand him again. I don't understand, Liu Jingge said coldly. Either way, mountains may crumble and rivers may shift, but fundamental nature is difficult to change. Luo Binghe is no good news. You'd better look out for yourself. After he finished, he got up and made to leave. Of course, Shen Qingqiu too knew that Luo Binghe was no good news, but at present he couldn't be certain that he was wicked either. It was still a headache. Meanwhile, as Liu Jingge was about to walk out the door, he passed that low table and glanced down. His next step slipped out from under him, as if he had spotted something extraordinary. Shen Qingqiu looked up. As Liu Jingge still hadn't left, he sensed that something was off. What is it? He asked. Liu Jingge stiffly turned his head and looked him up and down with the complicated gaze of someone seeing something entirely new. After a while, he shook his head, and only then did he open the door to leave. Within these short couple of steps, he seemed to even trip over the threshold. What exactly is it? Shen Qingqiu snoozed away soundly all night. The next morning, half dreaming and half awake, he sensed someone else in the room. This person's steps and the movements both were incredibly light. When Shen Qingqiu opened his eyes, he immediately froze. The only one who'd be interested in slipping into his room first thing in the morning was obviously Luo Binghe. But it was a very different Luo Binghe. He had changed into a set of white robes, and his dark hair was neatly bound with a light-colored ribbon. Furthermore, he was hurrying about the room with a relaxed and contented expression. His current attire and appearance was exactly identical to the Luo Binghe from before the Immortal Alliance conference. The model of a flawless and pure disciple of a major sect and the image of a pretty diligent and competent young wife. It really was... Luo Binghe turned. At the sight of Shen Qingqiu propping himself up on one arm, he reached out a hand and said, all smiles, Shizun is awake. Breakfast is on the table. Shen Qingqiu put a hand on his forehead, but his body reacted by itself to take Luo Binghe's hand and get off the bed. If he had to blame something, it would be that the scene before him was precisely the standard service he had received every morning back at Qingjing Peak in days long past. The whole breadth of the morning activities, getting up, getting dressed, washing, doing his hair, serving the meal, eating, was all naturally done under the auspice of Luo Binghe's mindful service. If the setting were changed to Qingjing Peak's bamboo house, he really would have had the terrifying misconception that the time was flowing backward. This inn's breakfast is frankly unpalatable, said Luo Binghe. Shizun will have to settle. If it was to be compared with Luo Binghe's handiwork, then this critique was very objective. Shen Qingqiu asked, Where is your martial uncle? I don't know, said Luo Binghe with a smile. Whenever one of these two mentioned the other, it was with these blunt and simple 3 words. Shen Qingqiu pretty much got the idea. There was no point in asking. In a flash, Luo Binghe had gone to make his bed. The devil incarnate making his bed! This was too fantastical a vision. Shen Qingqiu didn't dare watch. Out of nowhere, Luo Binghe spoke again. But if Shizun is allowing me to call Liu Qingge martial uncle, that means he still acknowledges me as a disciple of Qingjing Peak? Duh! How many times have you chased me around calling me Shizun this, Shizun that? Since when has this master said you were no longer his disciple? Asked Shen Qingqiu. I thought Shizun had tacitly driven me from the sect long ago, said Luo Binghe as he folded the sheets. I always chased after you calling Shizun, but, in fact, I was deeply afraid that it was just my one-sided wishful thinking. Shen Qingqiu couldn't take it anymore. He covered his face. Have some backbone, won't you, Binghe? You're the top-shelf stallion protagonist who once stood before his harem, oppressive presence overflowing as he coolly declared things like, quote, I do have this many women, and there's only going to be more. Deal with it or get lost. Who exactly is this pure-hearted young man who serves tea, carries water, washes clothes, and folds blankets for someone who bashfully speaks only when his back is turned? Huh? Who's possessing your body? Shen Qingqiu finally had another opportunity to lecture his disciple. He drank a mouthful of tea, then said, It's very good that you think this way. Since you know you're still a disciple of Qingjing Peak, then you must not be as disrespectful as you have been to all your martial uncles, especially when we return to Changqiu Mountain today. You must give a proper apology for laying siege to the mountain and ruining the hall last time you were there. Of course he didn't mean only a verbal apology. Luo Binghe would definitely have to pay the original construction cost for all the public facilities he had destroyed as compensation. This would be the bare minimum to demonstrate sincerity. Luo Binghe whisked away the breakfast dishes as he carelessly said, There's no need to return to Changqiu Mountain today. Said Shen Qingqiu. What did you say? I said, if Shizun really wants to see all those martial uncles, we don't need to return to Changqiu Mountain. We can change direction and head straight to Zhao Hua Monastery. When the three words, quote, Zhao Hua Monastery, left Luo Binghe's mouth, the system sent a notification. Zhao Hua Monastery quest officially issued. Issuer, Luo Binghe. Please select whether to accept. The quest issuer was actually Luo Binghe himself? Shen Qingqiu squinted. How do you know? Won't Shizun know if he goes? Asked Luo Binghe. Meanwhile, Liu martial uncle still hasn't returned. Right after the words left his mouth, Liu Qingge arrived, kicking the door open with a bang. The door fell flat onto the ground, but Shen Qingqiu actually felt this was the style and entrance method that Liu Qingge should normally have, so his expression didn't so much as flicker. Liu Qingge didn't spare Luo Binghe even a single glance as he said to Shen Qingqiu, Change of plans. We're not returning to Changqiu Mountain today. We're going to Zhao Hua Monastery. Shen Qingqiu stood. Did something happen? Something happened, Liu Qingge echoed gravely. The news came after midnight last night. Today the leaders of many sects are going to Zhao Hua Monastery on their invitation to discuss. Changqiu Mountain sect is included. The cultivator families of the city have already made preparations and departed. On the way to Zhao Hua Monastery, they passed by Jinglan City. It had been a few years, and who knew what this once prosperous merchant capital looked like now after that calamity. If they hadn't been in such a hurry, Shen Qingqiu would definitely have flown through the thick layer of clouds to take a look. Not long after passing Jinglan City, they arrived at Zhao Hua Monastery. The treasured monastery was dignified and stately, seated halfway up a verdant ancient mountain. This originally quiet and secluded old monastery was now a boiling cauldron of voices and darting silhouettes, and an unceasing parade of flying swords in formation pouring in and out of the mountainside. The trio stopped at the bottom of the flights of stone stairs leading to the Hall of Great Strength. "Come with me to see sect leader," Liu Qingge said to Shen Qingqiu. Shen Qingqiu was just about to nod when Luo Binghe also walked up to them. His status was special, and this was a rather sensitive situation, so Shen Qingqiu said, "Go lie low for a bit. Don't give those sect leaders the chance to point their spears at you." "If they want to point, they can," said Luo Binghe, uncaring. "Of course I will go with Shizun." Once again, he was refusing to listen. If Shen Qingqiu really let him follow along and he was recognized, there would be a great deal of unnecessary trouble. "Little marshal brother, you go first. I'll come later," said Shen Qingqiu. Liu Qingge gave them a cold look before he flew up the stairs, heading off to the rendezvous with Changqiu Mountain. As long as he intentionally restrained his presence and adjusted his expression, Luo Binghe could make himself look harmless. Amidst the jostling crowd, he managed to appear to be a good, upright youth, albeit one with somewhat excessively good-looking face, which made it difficult to avoid drawing attention. As for Shen Qingqiu, aside from his one rather unfortunate appearance in Jinglan City, he had been buried in the ground and not shown his face for years, so the chance of him being recognized was even smaller. The area outside the hall, as well as the plaza, were packed with rings and rings of people, forming a human wall. Before, the most numerous and arrogant among them would definitely have been the disciples of Huanghua Palace, but now that Huanghua Palace had become a heretic cult in all but name, they were naturally excluded. They hadn't received an invitation in the first place, and not a single one of them was to be seen. Several of Zhao Hua Monastery's abbots presided over the occasion from the center of the Hall of Great Strength. Even Master Wu Chen was among them. Only when Shen Qingqiu looked closer did he discover that both of the man's lower legs were wooden prosthetics, which allowed him to stand and walk as he once had. Changqiu Mountain sect, with Yue Qingyuan as its head, sat to the side of the hall, watching with a solemn and respectful gaze. Liu Qingge had just arrived to stand behind Yue Qingyuan and leaned down to whisper a few words in his ear. Yue Qingyuan's expression stirred, and he inclined his head slightly, looking all around. Beside Master Wu Chen was a head of Zhao Hua Monastery, Abbot Wu Wang. This old monk, beard and brows peppered with white, pressed his palms together, his low, deep voice echoing throughout the hall, loud and clear. "This old monk will ask outright, 'All who are present, how many of you had the same dream last night?'" Dream? Needless to say, this was Luo Binghe's doing. Said perpetrator whispered in Shen Qingqiu's ear. Wasn't Shizun fretting about not having, quote, evidence? You don't need to worry any more now, do you? No wonder Luo Binghe had fallen asleep for a moment on Xiuya's sword. To think Shen Qingqiu had even thought he was running out of energy. Turned out that at the time, he was actually activating his dream powers. Luo Binghe's eyes brimmed with, "Compliments, please," and "Head pats, please." However, Shen Qingqiu was coming down with a headache, wondering what exactly Luo Binghe had crafted in that dream he distributed. How had he communicated a situation so dire that all these people would scurry to Zhao Hua Monastery for this serious discussion? He didn't even need to ask, as someone else got impatient first. "Could someone say exactly what this dream is?" This person looked quite familiar. Shen Qingqiu thought for a moment and suddenly remembered. Wasn't it that person from Huayue City that... What sect was it again? Oh, the Ba-Qi sect. The Ba-Qi sect's head disciple. Master Wu Chen said politely, "May I ask, this sect leader, what is your cultivation level?" "Late core formation." The two abbots looked at each other, and quite a few people began to quietly cough. Amidst the silence, Master Wu Chen was the one to hint at what was going unsaid. "Then that is strange. Within our monastery, everyone with cultivation from core formation and up had the same dream." What he didn't say was that if this fellow really was at late core formation, by all rights he should have had the dream too. A chorus of agreements came from below. "That's right. All the members of our sect below core formation were likewise unaffected last night." "Wow! Lying about your cultivation to everyone's face and being exposed on the spot. This really was lifting a stone and dropping it on your own foot." Shen Qingqiu internally lit a candle for this good brother who still hadn't made a bit of progress even after so many years. However, although this brother's cultivation hadn't advanced much, his face had grown much thicker. He wasn't the least bit embarrassed and instead said in a loud voice, "There are exceptions to every rule. Just tell us exactly what was the dream." This Ba-Qi sect had such a tyrannical name, yet they were actually without a single core formation cultivator. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to ask about it in front of such an audience. It looked like this guy wasn't here because he'd been invited to the discussion, but simply to get in on the action and make himself known. Wu Wang furrowed his brows, but Master Wu Chen was a good-natured person, and he patiently explained the general outline. The contents of the dream were that Tianlang Jun, who had been sealed under Bailu Mountain, had recrafted a corporal body to unleash a storm of carnage. Though Master Wu Chen was elegant in his choice of words and metaphors, and had redacted some of the contents, with Luo Binghe's tastes, the quote, "storm of carnage" he spoke of would absolutely not have been limited to simple killings and beatings. The monk had definitely left out some heavier types of play.